Ladies and gentlemen, we've just concluded a high-level retreat of the Extended Bureau on Africa Union institutional reforms, and once again, I extend my deepest appreciation to my brothers, the heads of state and government, participating for their insightful contributions and excellent commitment to the Africa Union and to its transformation into a more fit-for-purpose instrument of African renaissance and global positioning. Our shared commitment to reforming the Union is key to unlocking Africa's full potential. A reformed Africa Union will serve as the bridge to prosperity for all the African people. To this end, we must speak with one voice, act with unity, and remain steadfast in our vision. This retreat has been a defining milestone in our collective journey towards consolidating African Union's institutional reforms, and I am profoundly grateful for the productive deliberations, meaningful exchanges, and critical reflections that have taken place. Together, we have taken stock of our progress, objectively assessed our achievements, and identified areas where we must redouble our efforts. I note that reforming the Africa Union is not a solitary task, but a complex, interlinked, and shared undertaking that demands our collective resolve. If we pull together in unity and purpose, we shall deliver an efficient, effective, and responsive Africa Union that is fit to serve the member states and the people of Africa effectively. Throughout our discussions, we have identified key priorities that will shape our focus in the coming months, and today's outcomes represent a crucial step in mobilizing political will, fostering consensus, and building the momentum needed to finalize the remaining aspects of the reform. While commendable progress has been made, much remains to be done. To achieve lasting and impactful change, the Africa Union Commission Chairperson and the Commission itself, including the Executive Council and the Permanent Representatives Committee, must pull in the same direction and accelerate their efforts to implement what has been agreed upon with speed, precision, and efficiency. I thank the heads of state and government for supporting the establishment of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Institutional Reform. What we agreed today in this retreat is about four critical aspects that to broaden the ownership of the reform process and to enhance the momentum and to provide strategic leadership for the implementation process, we have decided that apart from the champion that was appointed, we need a committee of 5 to drive the implementation of the already agreed reforms of the different agencies, institutions, and organs. Secondly, we also agreed that for a continent with as much potential as Africa, with a population of 1.4 billion people, with the highest resources of energy and natural resources, with the demographic dividend being the youngest continent, a continent that will probably have 25% of the world's workforce in the next 20 years or 25 years, and a continent that will be the largest single market by 2050. With the resources in food production and many other natural resources, it becomes absolutely necessary that stability, peace, and security become a solid cornerstone of the Africa we imagine into the future. And therefore, it is absolutely necessary at this point in time for Africa Union to reimagine rethink, reorganize our peace and security architecture. As things stand today, Africa is a big theater of conflict and, unfortunately, terrorism. And our response has been uncoordinated, under-resourced, and not very well planned. Therefore, we have recommended that a high-level panel interrogate our peace and security infrastructure, including the envoys across the continent, the infrastructure around the Africa Union Commission, the Peace and Security Fund, and also the effects of Resolution 2917 that now makes it possible for African-led peace efforts to be funded by the United Nations with the resolution of the United Nations Security Council. Because without and unless we deal with the conflicts in our continent, the threats and ravaging effects of terrorism in our continent, it will become almost impossible to undertake any meaningful investment or development or economic activity in our continent. And therefore, matters of peace and security are existential to us as a continent. It is also important that this retreat discussed the subject of financing for the Africa Union. We did undertake that we will finance 100% of the operational budget, 75% of the program budget, and 25% of the peace and security budget. But that has not been attained. Again, we have provided a framework, and I will be recommending to the summit of the heads of state and government next month on our suggestions on how we can plug the gaps and provide adequate funding and a mechanism for adequately financing the Africa Union. The third issue that we have agreed on is the operationalization of the Africa Court of Justice. As we all know, this is what was envisaged in the Constitutive Act of the Africa Union, and to provide clarity and to exercise judicial authority of the Union. The African Court of Justice and the protocols necessary for its implementation were concluded in 2009, and 16 years later, we have not been able to operationalize. I will therefore be making a recommendation for the operationalization of the African Court of Justice with the appointment of judges so that by June this year, we can have a mechanism for conflict resolution in our continent, especially on disputes between countries, disputes between institutions of the Africa Union, and a reference for the tribunals that currently exist. Once again, it is a very important forum that we have engaged in that will go all the way to a presentation on the Pan-African Parliament to make it much more accountable, to agree on the election process of members of the Pan-African Parliament, to look at the responsibility of the Pan-African Parliament to enact model laws that will serve the greater interest of the continent and support institutions like the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. It will also provide a mechanism for accountability for us as a continent and as a union to hold the executive to account, to hold agencies to account, to provide for a budget-making process, and to provide approvals for purposes of accountability. A fit-for-purpose Africa Union is a necessary imperative at this point in time if the Africa Union has to play the role and speak for the 1.4 billion Africans. We also reflected extensively on the burden of regional conflicts and threats of terrorism on our continent, and it is without a doubt that conflict remains a major obstacle to Africa's development. It must be confronted, and with all the capabilities and urgency that this continent can muster. I welcome this retreat's focus on rebooting Africa's peace architecture by establishing a panel of experts to propose modalities for strengthening the continent's current conflicts response and financing mechanisms. Only when Africa can decisively address the conflicts within our soil, including the ongoing grave developments in Eastern DRC and the Sudan, can it stand proud of its liberation. It is for this reason that we have agreed under the framework of the East African Community to convene an urgent extraordinary meeting and summit on the situation in Eastern DRC on Wednesday. I have consulted with heads of state from the East African Community and beyond, and we are all in agreement that now more than ever, it is an existential issue, not just for the people of Eastern DRC, but for this region. The situation in Eastern DRC now demands our collective focus. And as the chair of the East African Community, I will be convening this meeting, as I have said. Once again, I underscore my appreciation and gratitude to the colleagues who attended this meeting, and it was in the spirit of unity, and it characterized all the discussions that we had. And I am very confident that going to Addis, we should be able to make the necessary decisions to move this process forward. Thank you very much.